If you have made bolognese and it felt like something was just slightly off, like it was good but not quite there, today that's going to change. In this video, I'm sharing 35 genuinely clever tricks that Italian home cooks and professional Italian chefs actually use to make the perfect bolognese. Number 35. Use a wine you'd actually drink. Italian cooks have a rule about this. If it's not good enough for your glass, it's not going in your pot. Cheap cooking wine is full of added salt and preservatives that concentrate as the sauce reduces, leaving a harsh metallic edge. Pour in a glass of a simple dry red, like a Sangiovese or Barbera d'Asti. Take a sip first, and if you'd enjoy it in a glass, it belongs in your ragu. Number 34. Toast your sofrito low and slow for a full 25 minutes. Most people sweat their onion, carrot, and celery for maybe 8 or 10 minutes and call it done. Italian home cooks know that the real magic starts around the 20-minute mark, when those vegetables begin to caramelize and release deep, sweet, almost jammy flavors. Keep the heat at medium-low, stir occasionally, and wait. That extra patience adds a foundation of sweetness that no amount of sugar can replicate. Number 33. Use a ratio of 2 parts onion to 1 part carrot to 1 part celery. This is the classic Italian proportion for sofrito, and it matters more than most people realize. Too much carrot makes the sauce overly sweet. Too much celery pushes a vegetal bitterness into the background. The double ratio of onion gives the base its savory depth without overwhelming the other components. Measure it out at least once, so your hands learn the feel of it. Number 32. Grate your carrot instead of dicing it. This one sounds simple, but the effect is significant. When you grate the carrot on the fine side of a box grater, it dissolves almost completely into the sauce during the long cook, contributing sweetness and color without any visible chunks. Italian grandmothers have done this for decades because it creates a seamlessly smooth base that allows the meat to be the star of the dish. Grate onto a plate, not a bowl, so you can spot thick shreds before they go in, since those chunks won't break down. Number 31. Add the milk before the wine, not after. This is a specifically Italian technique documented in the traditional Bolognese recipe from Bologna itself. You cook the meat, then you add milk first, and let it reduce before adding any wine. The fat in the milk coats the protein fibers of the meat, which prevents the acidic wine from toughening them. The result is beef that stays tender and silky throughout the entire cooking process, rather than turning dense and chewy. The insider trick is patience. Let the milk reduce almost completely first. Number 30. Choose whole milk, never skim. The fat content in whole milk is what does the actual work here. It creates a thin, protective barrier around the meat proteins, acting almost like a buffer. Skim milk doesn't have enough fat to achieve this effect, so you end up with the moisture without the protection. Italian cooks wouldn't dream of using a low-fat alternative in their ragu because they understand that fat is a cooking tool, not just a calorie count. Some grandmothers stir in a touch of cream alongside the milk in colder months. Number 29. Brown your meat in 3 separate small batches. This is probably the most common mistake people make. Dump all the ground meat into the pan at once and it steams rather than sears because the pan temperature drops too quickly and moisture gets trapped. Italian chefs know to work in small batches, spreading each portion thinly across a very hot pan and waiting until a proper dark crust forms on one side before breaking it up. That crust is the Maillard reaction, creating hundreds of new flavor compounds that you simply cannot get any other way. A secret worth knowing is to resist stirring while that crust forms, since stirring early resets the steaming process. Number 28. Use a mix of beef and pork in a 70-30 ratio. Pure beef bolognese can taste one-dimensional and a little dry. Pure pork is too fatty and sweet. Italian home cooks typically blend the two, using roughly 70% beef for structure and depth and 30% pork for fat, moisture, and a gentle sweetness. The pork essentially bastes the beef from the inside during the long simmer, keeping the overall sauce incredibly rich without tipping into greasiness. Some Emilia-Romagna cooks work in a small amount of veal too, adding a sweetness nobody can quite pinpoint. Number 27. Season the meat directly with salt before it hits the pan. Not after, not during, before. Salting the meat a few minutes before cooking draws just a small amount of moisture to the surface, which then evaporates almost instantly when it hits the hot pan, helping to concentrate surface flavor. Italian cooks treat this as a non-negotiable step because unseasoned meat going into a pan produces a flat-tasting base that all the wine and tomato in the world can't fully correct. A lesser-known detail is timing. Salt no more than 5 or 10 minutes ahead, since salting too early braises the meat instead of browning it. Number 26. Deglaze the pan with white wine, not red, after browning the meat. Now this might surprise you because red wine is what most people think of with Bolognese. But many Italian home cooks in the Emilia-Romagna region actually use white wine for the initial deglaze after browning the meat. White wine has higher acidity and lifts the fond from the bottom of the pan more efficiently without adding the heavy tannins of a red, which can turn bitter during prolonged cooking. The red comes later, if at all. A trick worth stealing is warming the wine slightly first, since cold wine can shock the fond. Number 25. Use pancetta, not bacon. This one matters for authenticity and flavor. Bacon is smoked, and that smokiness competes directly with the delicate flavors of the ragu. Pancetta is cured but not smoked, so it adds pure pork fat and a savory depth that melts invisibly into the background of the sauce. Italian cooks render the pancetta first, before the sofrito even goes in, so that every subsequent ingredient cooks in that rendered pork fat. It's flavor layering from the very first moment. Number 24. Render the pancetta until it's almost completely melted. Don't just cook it until it changes color and move on. Italian cooks take it all the way, stirring it over medium heat until the fat has rendered out almost completely, and what's left are tiny concentrated bits of crispy pork. Those bits dissolve into the sauce during cooking, leaving behind pure fat and flavor. The goal is not crispy pancetta in your final dish. The goal is invisible pancetta that flavors everything around it. One important detail is dicing the pancetta almost to a mince first, since larger cubes render unevenly and leave chewy pieces behind. Number 23. Use a wide, heavy-bottomed pan, not a tall stockpot. The shape of your cooking vessel genuinely affects the outcome. A wider pan gives you more surface area for evaporation, which means the sauce reduces more efficiently and develops a more concentrated flavor. Italian cooks use a wide, low-sided brazier or terracotta pot specifically for this reason. A tall stockpot traps steam, slows evaporation, and produces a sauce that's watery and pale in comparison to what a proper wide vessel delivers. If you own a terracotta pot, use it here, since clay distributes heat with almost no hot spots. Number 22. Never let the sauce boil after the liquid goes in. Once you've added your wine, stock, and tomato, the heat goes down to the lowest possible setting. The surface should barely be trembling. Italian home cooks call this sobbolia, which means to barely simmer. A rolling boil at this stage would cause the meat proteins to tighten and squeeze out their moisture, resulting in a dry, grainy texture. That barely there trembling simmer is what produces the silky, almost creamy consistency that defines a proper Bolognese. A clever workaround is a heat diffuser plate under the pot, which makes it nearly impossible to overheat the sauce even on a stove that runs hot. Number 21. Cook it for a minimum of 3 hours, ideally 4. There is no shortcut for time. The long cook breaks down the collagen in the meat, converts it to gelatin, and that gelatin is what gives a finished Bolognese its glossy, almost sticky quality that coats every strand of pasta. Italian grandmothers in Bologna don't make Bolognese on a Tuesday night after work. It's a weekend project. 3 hours is the floor, 4 is better, and if you can manage 5, you will taste the difference. Keep the lid slightly ajar rather than fully on or off, letting just enough steam escape to concentrate the sauce. Number 20. Add a Parmesan rind to the pot. This is one of those Italian home-cooked tricks that feels almost too simple to be real. Whenever you finish a wedge of Parmigiano Reggiano, save the rind in your freezer. When your Bolognese is simmering, drop one in. The rind slowly releases umami compounds, glutamates, and a deep savory richness that amplifies every other flavor in the pot. It won't fully dissolve, but it will give more than you can imagine. Fish it out before serving. Some home cooks keep a freezer bag just for rinds and drop in 2 or 3 for a large batch. Number 19. Use chicken stock, not beef stock. This one genuinely surprises people. Traditional Italian Bolognese from Emilia-Romagna actually calls for brodo di carne, which is often a mix, but many Italian home cooks specifically prefer chicken stock because it has a lighter, more neutral flavor profile. It adds body and moisture without competing with the meat itself. Beef stock can overpower a long-cooked ragu and make it taste heavy and one-note. Chicken stock lifts it instead. Number 18. Add the stock a ladle at a time, not all at once. This technique mirrors the way Italian cooks add liquid to risotto. By adding the stock gradually, the meat has time to absorb each addition fully before the next arrives. This produces a sauce where the meat is saturated with flavor from the inside out rather than just sitting in a pool of liquid. Add a ladle, wait for it to reduce almost completely, then add another. Your patience is repaid with incredible depth. Keep the stock warm on a back burner, since cold stock slows the whole reduction down. Number 17. Use passata, not canned whole tomatoes. In Bolognese, tomato is a supporting character, not the lead. Canned whole tomatoes contain seeds and excess liquid that dilute the sauce and add a slight bitterness. Italian home cooks use passata, which is simply sieved tomato that has had seeds and skin removed. It integrates smoothly, adds a clean sweetness and color, and doesn't fight with the meat for dominance. Use just a few tablespoons. In a true Bolognese, you should barely taste the tomato. Some cooks stir in the passata an hour early, letting it caramelize, which mellows any raw acidity first. Number 16. Don't use garlic. I know this sounds wrong. Every pasta sauce you've ever seen has garlic in it. But traditional Bolognese from Bologna does not include garlic. This is not a matter of debate among Italian chefs who come from that region. Garlic's sharp, pungent flavor would dominate the delicate complexity you've spent hours building. The depth in a proper Bolognese comes entirely from the slow-cooked sofrito, the rendered fat, the browned meat, and the long simmer. Adding garlic changes the whole character of the dish. If you crave that garlic note, some cooks briefly infuse the oil with 1 clove, then remove it. Number 15. Add a small pinch of nutmeg. This is a quintessentially Italian touch that almost nobody outside Italy does. Freshly grated nutmeg, just the smallest amount, a literal pinch, is added to Bolognese by Italian home cooks in Emilia-Romagna. Nutmeg has a warm, slightly sweet, earthy flavor that bridges the gap between the richness of the meat and the brightness of the tomato. You won't taste nutmeg specifically in the finished dish, but you'll notice something feels more complete and rounded. The insider detail is freshness. Grate whole nutmeg yourself, since pre-ground loses its aromatic oils within weeks. Number 14. Use fresh tagliatelle, not spaghetti. This is not optional if you're going for the authentic Italian experience. The Accademia Italiana della Cucina officially registered tagliatelle as the correct pasta for Bolognese. Fresh egg pasta has a porous, slightly rough surface that physically grips the sauce, holding it against every strand, rather than letting it slide to the bottom of the bowl. Spaghetti is smooth and dense and sends all that gorgeous ragu you spent hours making straight to the plate. Use the right pasta. If fresh tagliatelle isn't available, reach for fresh pappardelle before dried spaghetti. Number 13. Cook the pasta 2 minutes under the package instructions, then finish it in the sauce. Italian cooks never drain pasta and spoon sauce on top as 2 separate things. They cook the tagliatelle until it's still quite firm, lift it directly from the boiling water with tongs, and drop it into the pan of simmering ragu. It finishes cooking in the sauce, absorbing its flavor from the outside in, while the starchy pasta water that transfers with it helps bind everything into a cohesive, creamy whole. Since fresh tagliatelle cooks in 2 or 3 minutes, start boiling it only once the ragu is fully ready. Number 12. Reserve at least 2 full cups of pasta water before draining. This starchy water is liquid gold in Italian cooking. When you combine it with the ragu and the pasta in the pan, the starch acts as a natural emulsifier, binding the fat from the meat with the water in the sauce to create a silky, almost glossy coating on every strand. Italian chefs refer to this technique as mantecatura, the art of emulsifying the pasta and sauce together. And pasta water is the secret ingredient that makes it work. Reserve the water the moment the pasta goes in, before you forget, since it's easy to dump the pot down the drain. Number 11. Toss. Don't stir. When you're finishing the pasta in the sauce, the motion matters. Stirring breaks the pasta and disrupts the emulsion. Italian cooks toss the pan with a forward and upward flick of the wrist, which allows the pasta to turn over itself repeatedly, without being agitated aggressively. This keeps the tagliatelle intact, maintains the creamy texture, and distributes the sauce evenly. It takes a little practice, but once you feel it working, you'll never go back to using a spoon. If tossing feels intimidating, use 2 large spoons instead, folding gently until you build confidence. Number 10. Add a knob of cold butter at the very end. This is called manteca in Italian cooking, and it's the final act of creating the perfect sauce consistency. Just before serving, pull the pan off the heat entirely and drop in a generous knob of cold, unsalted butter. Toss the pasta rapidly with the sauce. The cold butter melts gradually rather than instantly, emulsifying with the pasta water and meat juices to create a rich, velvety coating that makes every strand look glossy and restaurant quality. Italian home cooks do this reflexively as a final act of care. Cut the butter into small cubes first so it melts evenly instead of pooling. Number 9. Let the ragu rest for at least 20 minutes before serving. Italian cooks understand that a ragu pulled straight off the stove hasn't fully finished its work. Resting allows the fat to redistribute back through the sauce, the flavors to settle and integrate, and the texture to relax from a tight, busy simmer into something more unified and cohesive. If you can make it a day ahead and reheat it gently, you'll be eating something even more extraordinary. Bolognese genuinely improves overnight because the flavor compounds continue to develop. Cover the pot loosely rather than airtight, since trapped steam can water the sauce back down. Number 8. Reheat leftover bolognese with a splash of whole milk. Not stock, not water, not cream. Milk. When you reheat a cold bolognese, the fat and liquid can separate, making it look greasy and broken. Adding a small splash of whole milk and stirring it in over gentle heat re-emulsifies the sauce, restores its creamy consistency, and actually enhances that silky texture that took hours to build originally. Italian home cooks never reheat bolognese without this trick, and once you try it, you'll understand immediately why. Reheat over low heat, partly covered, since high heat is the fastest way to break the sauce apart. Number 7. Finish with a splash of the pasta cooking water at the last second. Even after all the tossing and emulsifying, your final flourish should be 1 last tablespoon of that reserved starchy pasta water added as you take the pan off the heat. This tiny addition loosens the sauce just enough that it flows freely around the pasta without being watery, creating that perfect consistency Italian cooks describe as all'onda, meaning wavy or fluid, where the pasta moves like a gentle wave when you shake the bowl. If your reserved water has cooled, warm it first, since cold water can shock the emulsion. Number 6. Grate Parmigiano Reggiano tableside, never pre-grated. This is about both flavor and texture. Pre-grated Parmesan has been exposed to air and loses its volatile aroma compounds rapidly. The powdery texture also doesn't melt into the hot pasta the same way freshly grated cheese does. Italian cooks grate it directly over the bowl at the moment of serving, using a fine microplane or classic grater so that it falls in light, feathery shreds that melt on contact with the hot sauce and pasta, integrating seamlessly rather than sitting on top as dry dust. Store the wedge in parchment rather than plastic, which speeds up how quickly it loses its sharpness. Number 5. Use the coarse side of the grater for your Parmigiano at the beginning and the fine side for finishing. This is a layered technique that Italian home cooks use instinctively. Coarse grated Parmigiano goes into the mantecatura step inside the pan, where the larger shreds melt slowly and add body to the sauce. Fine grated Parmigiano goes on top just before serving, where it dissolves almost instantly on contact with the heat, creating a thin, aromatic crust of cheese on the surface. 2 different textures, 2 different moments. One extraordinary result. Number 4. Never rinse your pasta after cooking. This should be obvious, but it bears repeating with the full Italian explanation. Rinsing pasta washes away the outer layer of starch that has formed on the surface during cooking. That starch is what allows the sauce to cling to every strand. Italian cooks treat rinsed pasta as a culinary crime because you're actively removing the adhesive that binds pasta and sauce together. Once that starch layer is gone, your sauce will pool at the bottom of the bowl no matter how carefully you've made it. If worried about sticking, a drizzle of cooking water, never oil, is the fix. Number 3. Make bolognese on Sunday and in a large batch. This is how Italian families have always done it, and there's wisdom built into the tradition beyond just practicality. Cooking a large batch, enough for multiple meals throughout the week, means you have a proper quantity of liquid and meat in the pot, which produces better evaporation dynamics and more stable temperature throughout the cook. Cooking a small batch in a large pot creates thin, patchy heat distribution. Italian home cooks also know that a ragu improves with each reheating, with Tuesday's bolognese tasting even better than Sunday's. Freeze portions flat in a sealed bag since it thaws faster on a busy weeknight. Number 2. Season your pasta water until it tastes like the sea. Italian cooks are almost aggressive about this point. The water your pasta cooks in should be genuinely salty, not lightly seasoned. A generous handful of coarse salt in a large pot of water is the starting point. This is the only opportunity you have to season the pasta itself from the inside. When pasta cooks in properly salted water, each strand carries that seasoning into the finished dish, which means your bolognese needs less salt to taste complete and every component is singing in the right key from the beginning. Add the salt only after a full rolling boil, since salting cold water can slow heating. And finally, number 1. The single most important trick that Italian cooks know, and almost nobody outside Italy actually does properly. It's this. Never add the cheese while the pan is still on the heat. Every Italian cook knows this instinctively. When Parmigiano Reggiano hits a pan that's still actively hot from the burner, the proteins in the cheese seize up, clump together, and turn grainy and stringy instead of creamy and smooth. The correct method is to pull the pan completely off the heat, wait 5 full seconds, then add your freshly grated Parmigiano while tossing continuously. The residual heat is more than enough to melt it beautifully. The result is a sauce with a smooth, glossy, almost satin-like texture where the cheese has fully integrated rather than forming rubbery clumps. Italian home cooks and Italian chefs across Emilia-Romagna treat this as foundational knowledge, the difference between a good bolognese and a transcendent one. Every single hour you spent on that sauce comes down to this final moment. Respect it. If your pan is heavy cast iron or enameled, let it rest off heat 30 seconds instead of 5, since it holds heat longer. Which of these 35 tricks are you trying first? And is there a secret technique your Italian grandmother used that you think should have made this list?